Well, good morning and welcome to Friday, the Friday edition of Relaxing Painting with Dice and Dungeons. So I was just spending some time before I pushed the start button, taking a look at what I'll be working on today. And this little picture here is pretty much what I get to go on. This is the interior, the interior of the Savoia, because this model is kind of cool in that the top of it comes off, okay, and reveals some of the interior detail, especially the cockpit area. And what I was planning to do was, and it looks like I should, is this is the color that it's all painted. And I thought, well, I should probably put some wash on it to make it look, more like wood. And the closer I looked at this picture, the more it's obvious that that's what they did. It's not applied very evenly. It's just sort of spotted around and in the corners. They did a nice job down here highlighting the lattice work where it sits in, where this sits in here, like this. Okay. Anyway, these areas got washed pretty heavily. The colors here are a lot more yellow than the color I'm working with. I'm using the same color that the painting instructions say to use, which is this desert yellow. But anyway, I'm not sure why the pictures look a lot different, but it does show that this was shaded with a wash. And so I'm on the right track, I guess, by saying that I'm going to attempt to do that. And the question then is, and then what wash do I use? These are the three I have. I have brown, umber, and smoky ink. The smoky ink is quite dark. It's what I ended up using on the cart, and it creates this nice wood look. But I think it kind of masks the color of what this is supposed to be, the yellow that this is supposed to be. And the umber I don't know. I'm just going to use the brown. It's a little more subtle, but I think it will have the effect that it's supposed to have. The other thing I was looking at as I moved ahead in the instructions, I kept thinking these were radiators. They're not. They're gun mounts. They go on here up in front. Okay, like this. And the machine gun gets mounted on the top of that. And this is painted gunmetal. I'm not sure why these are painted green, but that's the color they're supposed to be. Looking at the box top, this is the gunmetal they used to paint the display model on the box top is a lot darker than this. But this is gunmetal. And I have some spray paint gunmetal that I used on the Apollo. Let me see if I can get that chart out. Think about these. I don't know, they're pretty. Ended up using this color. It's really, to be honest, it's not really any different. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to test some washes on the gunmetal also, just to see how that works. So at some point, fairly early on here, I'm going to get a piece of paper like this and put some gunmetal paint on it. And then I've got three or four different kinds of wash that I can experiment with. Just reaching down here at scrap paper, and it's just scrap paper. Why am I messing with it? Yeah, and I think I'm actually going to start with that. Fairly, it's a safe thing to do first thing on a Friday morning. Okay. Oh yeah, the other thing. This is a big deal. If anybody had been watching the construction of the Apollo, um, what what you would have noted was that when a piece got done, when there was a completion of a section of the Apollo, it got put into a box because I don't have any way to display it. Okay, and I didn't want them to get all dusty and knocked over, so I've got a bunch of boxes over there filled with Apollo pieces had been completed or almost completed. So this is a big deal today here. I'm going to box the cart. The cart's finished. It's in a box. That means I have completed a piece of the Porco Rosso. Yeah, there it is. It's now in a box. Set that over there where I hopefully will not knock it over later. Yeah, so I'm these, as it says, how slow can I go? It's just, I'm experimenting with these things in different colors and washes and trying to see how they would look. And unfortunately, you get to see it in real time and not in edited time, like on some streams, where somebody does a bunch of stuff and hardly anything gets done, but they cut it down to like 4 or 5 minutes of things actually happening. On this stream, you get to see things as they happen, right? And if it takes me the better part of an hour, which it did, to paint this whole bit here, what is that? Oh, that's okay. Yeah, to paint the detail on here and get the boundaries of the colors from one section to the other correct. Well, that's just how long it took me, because slow and careful, right? So if it took 45 minutes to sand down the seams on the sides of what these are, which are now gun mounts, I discovered, not anything else, that's how long it takes. So you get to enjoy that with me in real time. I'm going to just use this bigger brush here. Oh, I'm going to use this for a wash. I don't want to mess it up right now. Just use one of these. So I'm going to paint a splotch of this gunmetal on this piece of paper. And when it dries, then I will test several different washes on it to see if any of them at all through its look. I've got dark gray, light gray, and blue. If you say blue, well, gunmetal is kind of bluish, and it might actually make it look good. I'm not sure. But there's no risk in doing it on a piece of paper like this as opposed to doing it on the model itself, where if it turned out to be a bad idea, well, then it would be a bad idea and would have to be redone. Okay. I knew I was missing something. What I'm missing is my coffee mug with coffee in it. Let this dry. There. Put it over there. Right. The odds of me sticking my fingers in it while it's still wet are minimized. Okay. I've decided to use the brown wash on this. The colors aren't the same as the box example, the display model level that it was, but then this color isn't the same color that they used, even though it's the color that's supposed to be used. Muttering on about that. brown. That needs a good mixing. And then this needs a good moving aside so that I can squeeze it out into this little thing here. This, okay, yeah. These are little plastic pellets that are made for like grade school, kindergarten, first or second grade painting stuff, maybe fourth grade, I don't know, elementary school. And so they come in a dozen in a pack, and they're meant to just be thrown away after they're used. And I know teachers don't do that because they don't have any money for supplies. So, but I don't either, really. So I keep using it until it becomes unusable. And this one is now really, really close to being unusable. It is very close to not being able to be used anymore. Okay, it came out pretty well. There's still detail work to be done on that. This is the where the piece I was going to use to test the wash. And it just, Porco Rosso is a cartoon, right? It's animated. And so I've been accused that my minifigs and things, because I tend not to just weather them, look cartoonish. Well, this does definitely look cartoonish. Let me put this piece of here so you can see it better. I don't know, the camera really should come down closer, I guess. You can see less field of view, but you can see what I'm talking about a little better. Yeah. So this is supposed to be wood, and I'm going to use the brown wash on it. I'm going to try to brush stroke it like in the grain of the wood where the grain would be, to make it look a little bit less bland. I'm really tempted to use the smoky ink on this, but it just changes the color so much. And I want to be a little more subtle with it. So what should I need a really soft bristled brush that doesn't hold a lot of paint, but also I can't, like this would be great for a large surface, right? But yeah, I have to be really kind of careful with it as I get it around the different colors. Okay, I'm going to try it with this. I'll see how it goes. There's no place to hold this, right? Right. I'll put a clip on these struts, these reinforcing struts, because there's no other place to grab it. And that's fairly easy to fix if I scratch the paint. Anyway, if I mess it up, I'll just reprime it and start over. Yeah, you can see the pigment settles. So this needs a good stirring. So if this works, given how the box looks, where the wash kind of emphasized the corners and stuff inside the hull, and the inside of the hull was washed as well, because there's a darker line down the center, is after I paint this, I'm going to do the wash on this bit. These are attached on top. I'm going to wash this after this is attached. Okay. I'm not going to wash the outside of the hull though, because the plane itself, looks it just looks like this color. That's it. And I'll be brushing it on, so I'll probably be doing like 3 really thin coats with a soft brush. I'm going to paint, and I have to paint the whole thing inside and out. Even though it'll delay the assembly. I mean, what I could do is paint the inside of this and do some assembly and then paint the outside. But I think I'm going to paint the outside first and then just try to be real careful with it to not mess it up. Take these off so I can see up close. Put them somewhere where I might find them again later. Way more than I need. Paper towel, because this brush absorbs a lot of this. I'm just going to get like a touch of it and then get rid of most of it. This will be too subtle. You get a little remind myself I can always take it off. I mean, I can always add more. It doesn't this a little darker at the bottom. That doesn't look too bad. I'm thinking this is looking okay. Do the other side. Yeah, it's easier to do the other. I want to do the edges. Can't forget the edges. And a little bit streaky on the edges, maybe. And on this side, I did this darker bottom and a little bit lighter on the top. See, if I were an artist, I'd know exactly what I was doing and how to apply this so that it would look how I wanted it to look. But I'm not. I'm definitely not an artist, and that kind of shows, I think. For going quiet, I'm like sort of paying attention to what I'm doing because I'm not really sure what I'm doing. Um, so I'm paying more attention to what I'm doing than kind of usual, even. The change in the color is good. I like the change in the color. This got all streaky. I don't want it streaky like that. I'm not sure what happened. If it's going to be dark, I want it dark at the bottom, not at the top. It is okay. This side's not. I don't know why it is refusing to be better. I think that looks all right. So I'm going to leave that alone. Then I'm going to mess with this. I'm just going to do the edges real carefully because I don't want to get it on the lighter color. Basic, pretty much just going to do this. side. I have to be real careful here. I'm going to get a little bit on the bottom of these things because those will show. I want them to be a little darker. But if I get the edge, I don't know if I want to come around. There's just not much work to work with here, so just touch it like that. So this came out, I think, pretty well. A little darker here. It changes the color some. Actually, it changes the color quite a lot, as you can see on this. And it looks more like wood. It looks okay. Set this aside and I think that this will be okay. It's not perfect, but it looks better. It looks a lot better than it did flat. I'll just say that. And so I'm going to not mess with it anymore. And like I said, with this, I'm going to do the washing after it's inserted because it looked really good on the box top. And the way it's done is that the wash just got into the corners, so it highlighted them. It was darker there and it's easier to do that when it's already in, right? Okay. So this one isn't done though. There's these little round holes, and those round holes have to be painted a metallic color. Just if I looked at it through a head magnifier, I'd be seeing flaws that I need to be fixing here. Sure. It's not going to be A plus perfect, but it's pretty good. Okay, so that experiment was not a failure. Yeah, I'm glad I used the brown because the other colors, I mean, this already makes quite a bit of shading. The other colors would have been way more. Just, it would have been really hard to control. Here. I want to see how these look to see if it's something that's worth messing with or not. I've got gray blue. I've got dark gray. I've got gray. I'm going to start with the lighter color and work to the darker and just see what happens. But it's this bit here, and I think it would look better if it just had a little something on it, just something on it to tone it down a little bit in terms of the shininess. I don't want it rusted or anything like that. Maybe a little darker. and maybe a little less shiny. This one might do it. We'll see. Just gonna take some off the bottle cap here. Yeah, see that there's actually a wash going on because it's kind of invisible on the gunmetal part itself, but it might be having the effect I want. Try the blue. You might say that's kind of a weird thing, but gunmetal is usually blued. Has a fair amount of blue in it, and so this might add. Dropping stuff all over the floor today. Here, let me see if I can move this back in view so you can see that there's actually there's paint drying. You can watch some paint dry there. Move these around, give you something to look at. But yeah, it really, it's kind of subtle. I'm hoping it's quite subtle, but it changed the color just enough so that it looks more like wood than. You can see the color change there. It's actually here. It's actually pretty significant when you compare the two. And I think this color unwashed will be fine for the outside of the hull, but for the inside, yeah, this shading is it sort of worked. But there's I don't like the way that ended up looking. As I'm looking at it, it's just a different angle. Yeah, actually, it might be okay. It was like it was streaky kind of. I'm not sure quite how to describe it. It's like the brush didn't carry it up far enough. It's pretty much what it was. It's quite blue, but when it gets on the metal, silver part, we're doing what I was thinking I wanted to do. If it's thin and uniform, that might be okay. This I think is just going to be way too dark, but I'll give it a try anyway. It's almost black. Goes on, it makes it look kind of just dirty, I guess, more than anything. It doesn't shade it as much as it just makes it look dirty, which is okay. I mean, is sometimes that's what you want, is to make it look dirty, but other times not so much. Oh, let me look at these. The light gray helps. It tones it down a little bit. The blue, if it's on really thin and uniform, I'm just going to do that. I think it works. Well, it's clear that this part fits pretty well. Even need to cement it in. I'll just put little dots of cement on some of these corners here. Oh, that's interesting. So if you look at how this model is built, this is a wooden lattice that goes inside the hull, and it supports it's a structural kind of thing, but it also supports things like all the control mechanisms in the cockpit and the gun mount. But I hadn't noticed this before, but I end up noticing these things when you look at them. So in the corners here, it's held in place. There's little triangles here, okay, where it's held in place. If this were a real airplane, those might be there. I mean, maybe not. I don't. They're there to hold this in place as a model, but it's almost tempting to paint those metallic, as though they were some maybe this dark gray structural support bits. You know, not like rivets, but brackets, kind of. Because it doesn't. They don't look like they would be wooden chunks. They look like they would be brackets, and I think I might do that after I paint the whole hull. Okay, I might paint those this dark gray color. Um, just just to try that because they're really obvious. I mean, you can see them really clearly, and they're not. They don't look like they are wood or like they would be wood. Like the hull here that looks like they would be attachment points. I mean, in terms of the model, they are attachment points, but in terms of like if this were the real airplane, what would they be? Definitely not going to have to cement this in. It's Yeah, it probably will, but some see you can really see them very clearly here now. And since you can really clearly see them, unless you think that they are like triangles of wood, and maybe they were like triangles of wood that went in as braces. I'm not sure. I'm kind of torn on that. If I don't paint them metallic, they'll definitely get washed pretty heavily, so that it looks like they're like something is glued in there. But it would make sense that you know, this wooden structure would be attached with like pieces of metal. Okay, I am going to use the blue wash on the gunmetal. I decided to do that, but I want there to be really very, very little of it. Yeah, let's do very little that there is none. I'm going to have to look at that with my head magnifier. Just as I rotated this, it looks like no, it's gone. It looked like there was some. Yeah, there it is, right there. And then it disappeared again. So this is very subtle, but I think it's working. This tiniest little bit of this gray blue on the metallic surface is making it look darker and bluer. I don't want to puddle up. I want it to be uniform across it. And I don't have a before and after, but it's definitely on there, and I think it definitely looks good. Well, yeah, I'm going to leave it like that. I think it worked as much as it can be seen at all. It's less shiny and it has a better color. Okay. Well, it was one way to use like 15 minutes, right? Use up 15 minutes of time um, doing almost nothing. What should I do next? Little metal things, little metal rings on the bulkhead there. I do believe I will use the same metallic that I've been using on a couple of other places, duraluminum. I used it on the card. It's kind of a nice dark metallic color. Real dark, but it's not hugely shiny. Putting things away, believe it or not. Keep the brown out. I'll be using that along with these other colors. Um, there's a slightly darker color, dark aluminium. I say aluminium because that's actually how it is on the bottle. See, it came from Europe. So it's aluminium, not aluminum. Why the difference? I don't know. There's the difference, but there is. Um, I'm just debating here about whether to use this color or a slightly darker one. Why am I spending all that time perseverating about it as these little circles that are metallic that are at the bottom of this piece that'll be barely visible that's inserted? But I'm going to use dark aluminium. I changed my mind. I'm not going to use steel. That's too dark. Just a little bit darker color. I'm not sure what those are. Let me see if I can see where this piece goes. Goes up in front there. Um, yeah, I'm really not sure what those are supposed to be. There's no painting direction for them. This is a detail that I'm going to be doing just kind of on my own. Yeah, I'm just looking at those. You can see they go here. You can see here how this is put together. So you can see them at the bottom. There isn't any like fuel line that goes through them or anything. So I'm really not sure what their intent is, but it's in like a canvas piece that is attached to a wooden frame with these little rivets. Uh, but they're pretty clearly designed to be like a metal ring that is inserted in there. Well, I can't use the toothpick to hold it because that goes inside there. So I'm going to hold it by hand, I guess. Hate to do that, but I'm not sure how else I can do that. These on. No, I don't need to put them on until this is stirred. This needs a major shaking. Sometimes I'm opening this with a paper towel over it because sometimes it just splashes. There, and it did. See, that would have been all over my hand, and I would not want it all over my hand. You learn these things by having them happen. Okay, put these on. Now I'm going to paint these little circles and hopefully not get the metallic paint all over the rest of it. Well, that was clumsy. I also hope I'm less clumsy here. Tiny bits of paint on the brush. It's a raised surface and keeping the brush almost horizontal. Rotating it and keep the brush at an angle that works for me without messing up. And then I need to paint the insides of these little circles also. This like a grommet. It's like a big grommet. They are a piece of metal that goes through the canvas or whatever this material is. But I took the darker color. So it would be way too bright and shiny. Yeah, this is the tetchy part. See that it's raised up, but it's supposed to be like metallic down to the surface of the canvas or whatever it is. But getting this little ridge here, painting the top of that is one thing, but then getting it down around the corner is another thing. And I'm not sure I can do that. Yep, I'm being very silent here because, this is tiny little stuff, but for me, it's taking a lot of, like, all of my attention. Tiny little grommet painting, tiny, tiny grommet painting with Dyson Dungeons. I might be able to talk about Dyson Dungeons while I'm painting the grommets. I could try that. But no, I am definitely in walking and chewing gum is impossible mode right now as I'm doing this. It's kind of startling that I can even do this at all. Yeah, to be honest. Okay. Well, it doesn't look too bad. Rotate this. Not going to be able to see that side of the grommet, the top side, the inside, after it's installed, but I know it's there, so I'm going to paint it anyway. There. That's part of that's part of being elderly. Is sometimes things jump out of one's hands. Well, it looks better than it did because the grommets are now mostly metallic. They're not perfectly done. Because if it were perfect, it would be this. If you can see it, the top of it, okay, is not painted silver because I can't get that line. Just can't do it. So now I get to do this over again on the other side, giving me another chance to mess up. As I talk about nothing, because I have to focus so much on putting little dots of paint on things. Well, at least it's mostly on camera. That's kind of a cool thing. Usually when I do not usually, sometimes when I'm doing this kind of detail painting, I'm looking at this and I'm not looking up. I get off camera and then I'm talking about what a difficult time I have painting these little details. And you just have to imagine that that's true, because I've wandered off camera as I'm trying to, hold it in the right place and the right angle. Yeah. It looks like I'm keeping this mostly on camera. Probably too far away from the camera to really see what I'm doing. But when I'm done with it, I'll show it to you on, up closer to the camera. What I need is like a professional camera person who could be at a respectful distance and not bumping into me or something, holding the camera and zooming in and saying that this is not that kind of stream. This is a little ring camera hanging over my head on a wooden workbench covered in a piece of cardboard. This is what you would call a very low budget stream. It's not exactly a no budget stream, because I have to buy the paint and the brushes, and I don't have to buy the cardboard. Those come from family members ordering stuff online, and I get free cardboard. It's getting a little shaky here. It's not helpful. It feels, I don't know, for some reason it's starting to feel like it's the last hour of the stream and not like the first. The brush, sometimes the paint kind of builds up on the point of the brush a little bit. No, this is good. Yeah. The metallic parts separating from the solvent. Just getting to the classic, good enough, or should I try some more? And if I try some more, will I mess it up? That point, which comes with a lot of frequency in this painting, in my painting, and I'd say more than half of the time, it turns out that I should have just left it alone. Sometimes it's, oh, I got it just right. Look at that tiny little dot of paint went exactly where I wanted it. But that's less than half of the time. All right, I'm going to this one more time. There's that little spot, right? There's that little spot that says, maybe you should leave it alone. And then I say, no, Dab of paint there. I'm not getting any little dab on my brush. Is there not paint on my brush? Well, it's definitely at that point where it needs to be left alone. I'm going to look at it one more time. Yeah, and now it will be. I don't have any way of holding it. Guess I'm going to have to put a clip on it down at the bottom here. Now the next things to be done are to start painting the hull. And the decision is outside first or inside first. Obviously, guess I'm going to paint the inside first. And the reason why is the contact surface is much less. Okay, so if I paint this, then turn it over, a lot of it is touching something. If I paint this and then turn it over, it's hardly touching at all. And as long as this is dry. Now, this is going to take, I know it's going to take a minimum of 2 and probably 3 coats. I know that from just testing this brown paint on some other surfaces. Okay, not the brown, this desert yellow is what it is. It's this stuff. And in the absence of being able to use an airbrush, which I can't, it's not that I'm not permitted to use it, it's just that I just can't use it. I can't use them without just hideous mess. So to minimize the brush marks, I use this big brush and put a thin coat on, and probably put 3 thin coats on. And I've done this before on larger surface areas, and it works pretty well. Actually, with this color, okay, here in the center, that's 3 coated. And the same sort of technique, and there's a little streakiness on it, but that's the fabric. It's supposed to be that way. I can get the same effect here, I'm pretty sure. And then, so I'll be doing that, and then paint will dry. And while the paint is drying, I'll do something else. The other bit about this, and I've talked about this before, is that the way this looks is that there's a wooden frame, right? And then there's this, whatever this is, I'm guessing it's fabric, because of the same color is used for something else that was canvas, is that you can see it's attached to the frame on this side, and it's attached with those little nails or screws. And you can see the nails and screws, and I'm just tempted to highlight them so that they're not the same color as the canvas, but that they're darker. And I have a really fine felt tipped pen that I could use to just touch the top of each one of those to just give it a little kind of non-uniform, but each one would be a little darker than they are now. The danger there is that if I miss, okay, and I did this before on the Apollo model, it was really sad. It really was. It was terrible. I was highlighting a tiny little thing, the pen slipped, and then it was a dark dot where it shouldn't be. And you say, okay, well, that's easy. You just, touch it up with a little dot of the right color. Well, that isn't so much the case, because the ink dissolves in the paint, and then I just had, instead of a touched up spot, I had a splotch where the ink dissolved in the paint, and just it was dark, and I had to because of that tiny little dot, the size of one of these things, I had to reprime and repaint the whole section. And so it's, what do I do? You know, do I go through the trouble of trying to highlight these, because they're, you know, they're not the same material as the canvas. They're holding it in place. Do I try that and risk messing it up? I'm not sure if it's worth the trouble. I don't know. But I do know that this needs to be painted. Nothing's going to be happening until this is done. And then I can put this support lattice in, and do the wash. Okay. And like I said, I'm not going to wash the outside. I'm going to just let this be really this color, the raw color. Like the outside was painted or something, or varnished maybe. I'm not sure. And I'm pretty well decided that I'm going to highlight these raised surfaces to make them look like brackets that are holding the wooden lattice in place, that they're pieces of metal. They're there just because it's the model, not because that's the way the plane would have been made necessarily, but I'm going to do that. I am really leaning against, even though it would make it, I think, look better, I'm leaning against trying to highlight those screw heads. Because I, you know, if I pulled it off, it would look pretty good. But just one little slip, just a tiny little slip, and it's a mess. That would be very hard to fix. So that's the compromise du jour, is I'm not going to do that. Okay, so this paint is going to go on, and I'm just going to brush long brush strokes, knowing that, okay, long brush strokes, except where I can't, that there will have to be multiple coats. Because this is not going to get the color uniform. Leave it alone, or else I'm going to just, I should know better. When the paint is in this state of almost but not quite dry, like that, that's when, if I brush over it, it just picks up the paint, and it makes it look all scaly. It's really a bad thing. There's an edge there, and the edge is where the hull fits on, and that needs to be painted. So I'm just going around the edge here. getting paint into that little crevice. I don't want paint on the edge. I don't want there to be. Anyway, I'll just wipe it off a little bit. So you can see that it definitely needs a second, maybe a third coat. That's just expected. It looks pretty scabby after the first coat. It just, the other paints have done that too. When I was working on the submarine, I was working with a similar color on some of the floors of the compartments. And as far as the submarine went, they were very large areas. They were smaller than this, but in terms of the submarine, they were large because everything on the submarine was pretty tiny. But I learned the same lesson is put multiple thin coats on, and then eventually the brush marks disappear, and there's a uniform to the surface. Yeah, see, that's what happens. Get the paint on, let it dry, recoat it later. This stuff dries pretty fast. I'll be able to put a second coat on. Oh, wow, it's only 11:30. Okay. Little circles. Complain about the circles. The little circles are fairly invisible. You can see one still there. At least they don't look like they did when they were just circular divots in the plastic. So yeah, it looks pretty scabby right now. After a second coat, it will look better, and then I'm venturing to say it will take 3 coats to make it look okay. And then once that's done, paint the other side, and then I can install this and put the wash in. Wash the inside of this, kind of like the way they did it on the box top. This insert here gets a little darker. It's like water got into it or something, or fuel. And then the insides of this lattice work, those get darkened as well. And if I'm really careful and sparing in my use of the wash, it should come out okay. You can see the difference in color between the washed and non-washed, and this looks much more like wood. Okay, that needs to dry. So what should I do while these things are drying? Well, one thing I can do is put this brush away. These brushes away. Using those later, but not now. I cleaned up my work surface. That's pretty amazing. While we're watching the paint dry, I can find the next parts. These are tiny little bitty bits of control surfaces that go here. Okay. But I'm not going to go from 1 to 2. I have done this before when I'm thinking about it. I would have these little parts, and they would just be laying around until this whole thing was assembled. And this isn't going to get assembled until I've got 3 coats of paint on here and then 3 coats of paint on the other side, that in and washed. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on between now and then before these little bits get cemented in. But what I can do, and what I'm going to do, is I'm going to move to step 3 here, and I'm going to get the fuel tank and the machine guns and the seat. Okay, these are big chunks, and they're going to need a lot of prep work. I know that there are going to be mold seam marks. This is made up of 3 parts, and there's going to be seams that need to be sanded out. And then this part, this is much more complicated. This is a wooden lattice with control panels and support structures and little the wheel. This is like a trim wheel, and all these other little bits that get painted really interesting colors. German gray, yeah, that same dark gray color. But I'm going to do these pieces here first. I think I can get these prepped and ready to go in when the time comes, and then the assembly, they can be assembled, and then this thing gets assembled separately. This is a whole different step. It might as well be step 4. I don't know why it's all part of 3. It's 3A and 3B. 3B, I'm going to do this at the same time as this, because there's just going to be a lot of tiny little bits that I'm going to be very carefully storing and working inside the box so that I don't lose them. Yeah, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to find these 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces and begin prepping them, and maybe even getting to the point where I will assemble the fuel tank so that the cement sets by next. I'd like to do that. I'd like to get this done today, and then have it on Monday, spend a lot of time just polishing out the seam that will show on either side of this. Okay. So I'm going to move this up out of the way. You can still watch the paint dry. And yep, I knew that by setting that box. Show this to you, just to show that I have gotten something done. This is the very last step in the instruction sheet. I got the cart done, the cart that it sits on when it's on land. So there, something was completed, but now it's in the way. I'll put it way. I'm going to put it way over there, where out of the way, and I'm not going to bump it. Okay, here we go. Here's the fuel tank parts. Okay, those are the fuel tank parts. There's the seat. I recognize that. Oh, and the machine gun. So all these pieces are right on here. Oh, and that's a piece of sprue that isn't necessary anymore. These are all the parts that I haven't gotten to. They molded them in red, but it's not going to stay plastic. That'll all get painted, Italian red, spray painted. So it won't look like plastic. It will look like painted plastic. Maybe even painted wood. All right, here we go. Going to be taking parts off of the sprue. I'll be sanding them down, getting plastic dust all over everything, especially on there. Yep. So much for my grip today. So the expensive things that I bought for model building that aren't necessary, but I'm finding helpful. is the vortex spinner thing. There, I'll show it to you. There, that thing. You put the paint thing on here and it vibrates and stirs up the paint. And then I shake it by hand anyway because I just, old school. And then the head magnifiers, which you have seen, which I did not put away. Okay. And those were, for me, essential. Were people who have good vision, front vision, or, maybe not, maybe just the head magnifiers have really turned out to be essential. And then I bought this little saw because taking parts off the sprues, I want to leave some of the sprue plastic on the part so that, and I really recommend this to anybody building models, is that you leave it on and then sand down to the model rather than breaking them off. Because like with this fuel tank, if I broke that off the sprue, instead of this little protrusion here, which can be sanded down, there could be a divot, and because it would break off inside the part instead of outside of it, and that poses a real challenge then in terms of filling it in so that it becomes invisible. I don't know why this is at such an angle. It's like it started to be broken off and then didn't. When I was a kid, like in 5th and 6th grade, when I first started building models, I just broke them off. And then my models all had little divots in them, but, when you're in 5th grade, who cares, right? But then I got single-edged razor blades. Boy, that was an important tool back then, single-edged razor blades. And then I would cut them off. I don't remember ever sanding them down. I'm not sure how I I don't remember how I prepped the pieces. But anyway, yeah, the single-edged razor blade was a lot better than than just breaking them off. And I was using an X-Acto knife, like on the submarine, which sort of worked, but also didn't. But this saw gives a way better control in terms of where the departure point is. I'm not sure. I'll have to see how those pieces fit together, so I can see where there are seams that need to be fixed and where there aren't. This little chair, that's going to require a fair amount of work. I'll explain that in a bit. The seat here isn't, once I get that off, and clean up the edges, because there's some, this is not badly molded. It's actually pretty well molded, except those damn circles. Damn it. Look at that. I mean, why? Why is there a circle in the back of the chair? There shouldn't be. And it's indented. Okay, so it's one of those where it's down in as opposed to raised above. So sanding it off and then polishing it isn't an option. It's one of those, I'm going to have to fill that with epoxy like I did on that. And that's kind of a pain in the butt to do, to be honest. But that's what I have to do. I can't let that go. These are machine guns. Well, that's a real disappointment. Because in some ways, this model is just really beautifully molded, just really, really nicely done. But in other ways, those circles, like these parts here are on one side or the other. are almost certain to have those little circles on. Yeah, these are the little bits of the down here. These are the little bits of controls that go inside the cockpit, and they're there. That's my finger. You can see they're really tiny. That's why I'm a little reluctant to dive into them right now until I'm ready to install them, because I could end up losing them. There's more of them here. And those, usually these have like 3 or 4 colors on them. Like parts of it are dark gray, so it's painted metal. Some little bits of it are chrome. Some handles are rubber, so they're black. This has little markings on a dial. This is probably a throttle. So there's going to be a lot of detail painting on those, and that doesn't bother me that much. What bothers me is painting the detail and not losing the part, because there's no place to hold them. And they're tiny, and if I drop one on the floor, well, I have to find it. There's no alternative but to find it. It'll be interesting to paint those. They'll make the cockpit look really cool because they're very detailed. But the challenge will be not just very fine detail painting, like little bits here and little bits there, different colors, getting the boundaries right, highlighting the detail without highlighting the detail appropriately on some of them. But again, the challenge is just the challenge for me is simply going to be not dropping them and losing them. I've done that with the submarine. I've dropped some things. I've dropped some things and found them. It felt miraculous, and it kind of was to find them. Okay, there's one done. The other, and now I'm done with this. I'm not going to be taking all these little bits off until later. So the question on the was how slow can I go? I'm answering that question for you as in real time as you're watching. Is there? It took 10 minutes to cut these off of the sprues, and then filing and sanding. I'll file some of this down so that it's close to the surface, and then sand it down and polish it so that it doesn't show. So these parts. Trying to look at the clock there. Oh, I've got like an hour and a half left. I got a lot of time. Make sure this paint is here. I'm going to do it. Don't do this. Don't test your paint that way. Don't. Put your tools away so that they're not in the way and you're not knocking over. Okay. It isn't used that often, so I could put it there. While I do that, I knock some other things over. Yeah, test thing. But I definitely want to get the fuel tank cemented together today. I definitely want to do that. Because then, I'll just show you as I piece this together. See, that's good. That was well designed. So there's a band that goes around the fuel tank, and I'll paint that a different color than the tank itself. Okay, because it's it's a band that holds it on. In fact, it's really, wow, they really did a good job. So if I don't know if you can really see this, but the band goes around, and then there is a screw here that tightens the band. Okay, it's like two parts, comes up to there and comes down to there, and it's tightened. And I'm going to probably spend some time um, painting those just slightly different colors, just little dots of different colors to highlight that. But what I like is that this part of this goes in here like that, and so there isn't a seam that shows. Okay, it's the band which goes over the top on both sides. So that's very good. I like that, and that's true on both sides here. There's nothing they could have done about this, I think. It makes a difference, the top and the bottom, which way they go, whether it's this way or this way. And I'm going to have, oh, well, it's pretty clear. No, it's not clear at all, which is which. It will be, yeah, this one has a little tab on the top for the attachment point like that. Okay. And this one should have a bigger tab on the bottom, which it does. And so what it is that the little slots are opposite sides of each other. That's important to know, because if I cement this together, and if I cemented it together like this, okay, then they'd both be on the same side, and I wouldn't be able to get the parts together. Yeah. So I'm going to prep these first, and then cement. I'm just going to cement these together. I'm not going to put the end caps on. Why? Okay, because if you look at this, okay, you can see the seam. You can see the seam where the two halves come together. And this is painted metallic, and that seam's going to show. And I don't want it to show. And so after this is cemented together, I'll be polishing away the seam on the sides so that it doesn't show. And I've had some success in doing that. And once that's done, okay, then I can attach the end caps, prime the whole thing all together, and then paint it, including the detail on the band. But if I accomplish nothing other than getting these two parts cemented together today, that's what I'm going to try to do. But I'd like to get all of these parts prepped if there's time, so that I can, I can even get these primed and painted next week. Okay, this is dry enough. I'm going to put another coat on, because it has to be coated on three coats, flipped over in 3 coats. You can't hear it, but that vortex spinner thing that I was showing you, the vibrator thing, the paint stirrer, that's what's happening there, is I'm stirring the paint. And it's making a lot of noise that is very nicely filtered out by the microphone, the software associated with the microphone. Okay, now after this coat goes on, it should look just a whole lot better than it does now. And there will still be some, my experience tells me there will still be some places where it's just inconsistent, and then a third coat will have to go on. Going to do my best to not have brush marks at this point. make an effort to not overbrush it. And that seems to be mostly okay. Yes. And definitely need a third coat, but it already looks better. I'm going to have to, just like right around nose, it's a little lighter color. So I have to do. I'm not going to do that now. Probably touch that up a little bit before I put the third coat on, or maybe depend on the wash to make it work. And I hope that is now located far enough away so that the sanding dust doesn't affect it. Okay. Yeah. Clean this off with some alcohol. This is going to be one of those. What did you accomplish today? Okay. So I've been at this now for an hour and 45 minutes. And what did I accomplish? I got some brown wash on these little pieces. I painted the grommets on these. I got 2 coats of paint on one side of the hull and put some blue wash on there and cut some parts out. And you can say, how slow can you go? And it's just immensely slow, incredibly slow, it seems. But, on the other hand, what could I be doing that would make it any faster? I don't know. Just getting a needle file. And what I'm doing is taking this sprue, on camera, the sprue that's sticking out here, where I cut it off of the sprue, it's still on there. I'm going to file it down so it's close to the surface, and then get some polishing, some fine sandpaper, and finish taking it off down to the surface. It's right along the seam, so when I polish the seam later, it will disappear completely along with the seam. Wiggling on there, I don't know. I have to be cautious. I don't want it to break off. There's 3 things about the plastic models that end up taking a lot of time, make a difference in the appearance later, but seem to be pointless and tedious. Okay. One is inevitable. The parts have to be attached to the sprues. There's just no way around it. And so there will be on every part at least one spot like this, where the excess plastic is hopefully just carefully filed and sanded away, okay, or leaves a divot in the model that has to be filled in somehow. That's unavoidable. The second is that with occasionally, not always, but with some frequency, the 2 halves of the mold don't fit together perfectly, and a little bit of plastic oozes out where the mold halves come together, and it's like a flashing. That's usually quite easy to get rid of. There isn't much of it. And so a little bit of sanding, never really even filing, a little bit of sanding usually gets rid of it. That, unlike this, which is inevitable, if the molding process was perfect, and this one's really pretty good, there's been hardly any flashing on it. Oh, I should say there's 4 things, right? So there's hardly any flashing that needs to come off of this so far on this model. If and that'll just sometimes happen. So that can be expected. The third thing, which shouldn't happen but does and happened on both the submarine and the Apollo. The submarine was made back in the 60s, and so okay, but the Apollo was almost unforgivable, is that the 2 halves of the mold don't line up. And that means that you get a part with not just a little bit of a seam on it from the mold flashing, but they don't line up, and so both sides need to be sanded down so that they line up, so you don't have like a piece like that, right, where one side is higher than the other and on the other side is the opposite. This has to be sanded down to this level, and on the other side this has to be sanded down to that level. Then the part isn't really the same size as it was to begin with. And that creates its own issues, right? So I'm going to use 800 grit, some really kind of fine paper. What's going to happen with this, I'll just give you a preview, is that when these are put together, okay, and the seam is sanded down, the surface texture of the tank will be affected, because the sandpaper will leave, but you can already see it. You can see there's a dull spot there where the file touched it a little bit. And so part of the process is going to be to rub the entire surface of this so that it's the same texture. That isn't the right word, but I'm not thinking of the right word right now. I'm going to use 800 grit, which is slow going. I could use like 400 grit and it would take the plastic off quickly. But this, even though and I'll just show you, it changes the surface texture. That was the word, texture, but not that much. And either the whole thing can be rubbed down with this like that, so it has the same surface texture, or in this case, I'll probably get like this 1500 grit and polish it out. This is when I'm using this, it's slow going, but it's less. It's either go more slowly now and more quickly polish out the sanding marks, or go more quickly now and spend the time polishing out the sanding marks later. And I have found that the results look better when it's slow going at the beginning. There, you can still see a little bit. See a little bit of white there, it's a little lighter color. Yeah, that means when that disappears, then I know that I've gotten rid of the sprue. fingernail over it. I'll leave that a little bit. I know it's not perfect, but I'm going to be sanding the seam later. I want it just to be all sanded down to the same, as I'm taking it off. This is on the opposite side of the other one, so anyway, if there's just a little bit of it left at this point, I'm going to say that's okay, because the seam where it's located is going to have to be somewhat vigorously sanded later so that it's invisible. Getting them off of the fuel tank here is the most important part. Actually, once this side is done, I could cement them together. I'm going to do that yet before the stream is over, so that I can polish the seams, make the seams disappear on Monday, and get them ready for priming. Once the seams are gone in the cylindrical part, then the whole thing, I'm going to assemble it completely and then prime it all together. Okay, just this up later. And it's just testing the polish. And then prime it all together rather than priming it and then cementing it. That way, if there's any issues with the cement or something, I can correct those with some sandpaper or a file or something before I paint it. Same sort of thing is happening here. There's a little bit of it still showing, but take care of that when I sand down the seam on Monday. I'm just going to rub this whole thing now, so at least it's starting out. Okay. I'm actually going to do the seat next, because the seat has to have this hole filled in. And I want to do that yet today too, so that on Monday I can sand it off. And so I'll be mixing some epoxy and putting a dot of epoxy in here. Hopefully, yeah. And that'll set over the weekend and be nice and solid. And hopefully I'll be able to sand it off then on Monday, just like the ones here. I had one, for some reason, the epoxy pulled out. It didn't adhere to the surface the way it should have. Okay, I'm being a little careful with this square on the bottom. That's not really going to show, because that's what attaches to, it attaches to the wooden lattice work thing that I was showing you before. Yeah. This from the bottom, I can file this all the way down, and then just polish on the edge, because the bottom's not going to show. If this isn't cleared off, it's going to get in the way. This is where I should start talking about old cars and repair things again. the last two streams, I was reminiscing about how many things on old cars needed to be replaced routinely. And a lot of those things don't exist anymore, like parts of the ignition, distributor caps, points, spark plugs hardly ever get changed anymore. People don't keep cars long enough for them to fail. Part of the problem back then, too, was that it was leaded gasoline, which, helped the engine run better, but the lead left lead deposits on everything, including the spark plugs. And that was an issue. Okay, so these are ready to be cemented. This is ready to be filled in with the epoxy. These, I'm going to clean up these, I guess. Wow, just all sorts of detail on these. This is really pretty impressive. I'm going to clean these just on the bottom here. These can be actually filed down rather than sanded, because this is the attachment point to that goes down on. So if there's a scratch mark on the bottom, it is completely hidden. So the idea is to get these nice and flush and clean so that they actually fit. And I'm not going to be cementing these on until the seams are sanded down on the tank. And then these go on the ends, and then it gets primed and then painted. And it'll be painted multiple colors because these straps will be a different color than the tank. And some of the adjustments, the little bolts, there's little bolts all over the place. Some of those adjustments will be a different color too. Subtle differences in the color, not the colors. Maybe I should call it the tone. Some will be they'll all be metallic, but some will be darker than others. I'm probably going to paint the tank aluminum. It'll be kind of shiny. And I might put a gray wash on it just to tone it down a little bit. The straps will be painted maybe dark aluminum so that it contrasts two tones difference. And then the bolts I might paint steel so that they really, you can tell that they're there. Since the designers went through all the trouble of building in the detail of the little bolts and screws that hold the strap together, I feel almost an obligation to paint them in a way so that they can be seen. Okay, that's pretty good. Test fit these. Test fit it after the whole thing is cemented together. Hopefully, they designed it so that the parts all line up, right? So that when this is all cemented together, it actually fits exactly into the little brackets. Expect that of this model. So far, it's been true of the two pieces that I've tested. Down here that are not part of the sprue. Think that they're intentional. Don't want to get rid of those. but then I don't want excess plastic on them either. That seems excessive. Yeah, so cars, parts that don't exist, especially parts in the ignition and the fuel delivery system, carburetors, okay, that needed to be adjusted all the time so that the fuel air mixture was correct. Those don't exist anymore. So, unlike points and plugs that needed to be replaced regularly, they just needed to be. They got the points got worn out because of the ongoing friction of the way the things worked. The plugs got fouled, and what that meant was that there was a buildup of lead, basically, and carbon on the plugs, so that the gap during which made the spark didn't spark, and then your cylinder didn't fire, and then you would know that because your car wouldn't run very well. Get a little container here. These parts aren't real tiny, but they are small enough to potentially disappear. These need attention yet, so I'll leave them out. The machine guns, they say just, paint them gunmetal, but, there's the detail on the barrel there. So that's definitely going to get washed so that all those little indentations are darker than the things around it. And then there's like the little levers on there that make it fire. It's the blue wash on that, and I think the way this is designed that will look okay. Of course, the challenge, I can already see that the challenge of painting this is it's all supposed to be painted the same color, but where does one hold it? Okay, maybe I'll paint the barrel first and then the rest of it, because there's kind of a dividing point there where I shouldn't get serious brush marks. I might just have to do something like that because if the whole thing has to be painted, there's no place to hold it. The place that was holding it would then not get painted, and that would miss that point. Okay, so after I finish filing and sanding the sprue remnants off of the machine guns, got it off the back there, and I have to get it off the bottom. I'm going to put the third coat of paint on that. Now, I'm actually going to take just a second, okay, and grab a smaller brush. Because what I'm seeing here, what's happening is that it's not getting painted here and here because of the long brush stroke, right? And so while this is paint drying, I'm just going to do my best to put what will be a fourth coat, just touching it up with a smaller brush, attempting to not leave any brush marks. But making sure that those get painted in a way that they're not painted now. Might not be all that well painted This paint changes color. A lot of these brownish kind of colors change color significantly when they dry. Okay. I meant to do that earlier, and I'm glad I remembered to do that before I repaint the whole thing. I'm just doing the touch up there. So that has to dry yet, and then I'll do the third coat. And if I don't, this water's so dirty. Change it out. Change out the wash water. If I don't get the bottom painted yet today, that's not a real big deal because, I'm not really getting anywhere on the inside of this yet. I mean, I've got other things to work on. So if I get out of order as far as the instructions go, that's just okay. I can continue to be out of order for quite some time, as long as the things that go underneath something else or are there to align with something else are done first. And it makes it look like nothing's happening and I'm not making much progress, but every minute I spend doing something like this, like getting rid of the excess sprue on the top, that's important. It's the top of the machine gun, so that definitely has. Why didn't they put it on the bottom, where if it wasn't perfect, it wouldn't show? But no, the sprue connected to the top of the machine gun, which is really very obvious, probably. And as such, I'm going to take the time to actually sand it down and sort of polish it a little bit. You'll feel it. Every once in a while, I say, wow, this is really good. They did a great job of this. They really thought this through. The detail is perfect. That sort of thing. And then something like this happens and it's, what? Who messed this up? Everybody who's watching the stream goes, well, there's another 15 minutes of nothing happening. Well, we get rid of that. But it's gone now. It's totally invisible. I can't feel it with my finger. Yay. And by the time I'm done with this machine gun, I should be able to put the third coat of the desert yellow on there. And set it aside to dry while I assemble the two halves of the fuel tank and fill in the back of this incredibly annoying circle in the back of the seat. And I can talk more about spark plugs. No, as I'm going front to back, just so much of the related to the engine, the ignition, the air fuel mixture, all of the belts and hoses, so many belts. At one point, that was actually a big deal. Is as new things were added to the car, the belts that had to be there, that were there from the very beginning. There was the timing belt that kept all of the components of the engine running together. That was important. And then there was a belt that connected the engine to the alternator. So the crankshaft is spinning, and then there's a pulley on the on the front of it, multiple pulleys actually. So there had to be one for the alternator that kept the battery charged while the car was running, because the car actually runs off of the battery when the alternator took the circular motion of the engine and recharged the battery and kept it charged while you were driving. And then there was one for the fan belt. That was, and that kept the fan running in front of the radiators so that the air was moving through the radiators so the engine didn't overheat. And then there's a water pump that also needed a belt to drive it, and that moved the coolant through the radiator. Now, if I recall correctly, some of those were run off of one belt. Okay, like I think the fan belt and it was different on different cars, but they, instead of having one belt for each thing, so that there was a fan belt and an alternator belt and a timing belt and a water pump belt. They might have run maybe two things off of one belt, but there were a lot of belts. And sometimes that was necessary. The pulleys were different diameters so that the spinning motion, was different for each of those components, that sort of thing. But then I remember it was a big deal when some manufacturer came out with a serpentine belt. And it was one belt that ran all of this. It was just this one gigantic belt and it was called serpentine because it meandered all over the inside of the engine compartment, so that I could drive all of these things. And, the upside to that was you didn't have four belts that could fail. You had one belt that could fail. The downside was that, if your water, if one belt failed out of four, sometimes, like if the alternator belt failed, you could keep driving off the battery until you got to a place where you could repair it. Okay. Or even if the fan belt failed, you could drive a while before the engine overheated. If your water pump failed, that time was shorter than if it was just the fan belt, because the coolant wasn't circulating through the engine, the way it should. But if your serpentine belt failed, then all of those things would fail all at once. And of course, fixing a small belt that was maybe 18 inches in diameter or something, that was a whole different story than taking a 4.5 foot long belt and getting it right, because the tension had to be set on each of these components. So instead of just, loosening a nut and moving your alternator a little bit, rotating it until the belt was tight and then tightening it again, okay, you had to do that with that and the water pump and the fan and the alternator, all of those things. And so that was, anyway, yeah. But that's the way things went, because one belt was easier to work with than multiples. Okay, I have to find a way of setting this up so that it is horizontal. Okay, if it's like this, then the epoxy, no matter how viscous it is going to run down, and I don't want it to be that way. So I'm going to have to set up kind of a holder. I don't know, why am I blocking on the word for it? A thing that will hold this steady and horizontal. And then I'm going to cement these together. Need to do both of those. These are actually more important than putting more paint on that. So I'm going to get on with this. I think I will. Let me get a clothespin. Test this. Parts together. I'm going to cement this together, and then I'm going to get set this up so that it will hold in the. I'll use a little sticky tape and something underneath there, and get that filled in, because those are things that have to sit and set between now and Monday. If I don't get the paint on there in time, well, then that'll just be a little bit of time on Monday. Using this sparingly, but in reality, I actually want the cement to ooze out a little bit into the seam, because if it's a little bit of a raised seam edge, then I can sand that off, okay, because I want it to fill the gap. And now I need to make sure that this is oriented correctly. Yep. It's like slot on one side and the other. I want to compress this, but I want the parts to be lined up as well as they can be. Maybe this is a bad idea. Okay. They got shifted out of position. You can even see it. Okay, they're not lined up. So, putting it under pressure is a good thing, but not if it creates a misalignment of the parts. Then that's not a good thing. Still some movement left. I'm going to take that opportunity to make sure that they are lined up as much as possible. That's good. That's going to hold. I don't need this. Nail here. I want to feel a raised ridge from both directions. If I'm feeling it in just one direction, then it means that one side is higher than the other. And right now, I look and feel they seem to be lined up pretty well, and the seams are almost invisible already. So I'm optimistic that once all of this, once that settles, I'll be able to sand those down and then sand the entire outside of it and polish it so that it will look seamless. So it's out of the way. Okay, now I need to mix up a little bit of epoxy. First of all, I need to get a thing for this. Thing, need a little piece of cardboard. And a bigger piece than maybe I did need, but it'll do. And grab a little bit of tape. Wrap this around on itself. I'm just making a double-sided tape here. I'm putting this on to hold that end of the chair because I don't want it to move around. So that just holds. Oh, wow. It's actually holding it up. I thought I had to prop that up underneath, but it looks like, okay. No, that worked. That worked better than I thought it would, actually. Now that looks pretty horizontal. Doesn't have to be perfect, but I don't want it at a 45-degree angle. Okay. I'm going to use the 30-minute epoxy, stuff that takes a long time to set, because that gives me a little more time to get it into the hole there. Now, finding all sorts of things on the floor. I'm finding pieces of paper. I'm finding an alligator clip. Didn't even know I dropped some of those. And I need a toothpick. Toothpicks are another good thing. Every modeler needs to have lots of toothpicks. They're cheap. You know, that's a good thing. You don't have to try to reuse them. I need hardly any of this. These little tubes of epoxy last forever, given the, like I'm squeezing out. You can see I'm squeezing out hardly any. And you can tell, given the spot that it's going into, that I have roughly 3 to 4 times more than I will actually need. The rosin and the hardener aren't going to do anything until they are mixed together. It's always, trying to get it equal amounts of each one, making sure that they're mixed so that the parts that the stuff I end up actually using is mixed. And to fill in the hole. A little bit around the edges. Just a little bit around the edges so that I can feather it. That will sand off. Okay, so this is going to set, and it will get very hard, I hope. And then I will sand down the back of the chair so that, if anything, there will just be a slightly raised bump, very slightly raised bump, and not a hole. And there, that's that. Simple toothpick. And here I don't, my waste paper there. Close that up. The reason for that is that the epoxy is now inside that paper and not on my fingers. Put the clothespin away. I'm not using that. This is just going to sit here until Monday, and then it will be, if experience tells me correctly, very tediously sanded down. It, it gets pretty hard. It doesn't sand very quickly, but eventually it will be good, and then it will. And then it will, if not totally disappear, be significantly less visible. Just over that, keep the dust out. How's the time going? We've got almost a half hour yet. Well, that's enough time to, that's enough time to take these off of the clips. Bad, but it's kind of spotty. I didn't expect it to look spotty. I don't need this here. I'm moving parts around. Here, I'll show you. These parts are done. And I just set them here. These will be covered with a paper towel. These parts are done. This part is going to be washed once it's assembled onto there. And let's put all of this. Well, this can just sit here. But I want these parts to be covered. So I'll get some paper towel and do that. These parts are labeled because they have to go on the correct side. Otherwise they won't fit right. I mean, it is possible to tell which one should go where by the orientation of the tab versus the bottom and the. Anyway, I labeled them anyway just to be doubly sure. Measure twice, cut once. Wear suspenders and a belt. This I don't need. I'm going to put a third coat of paint on this now. And then what will I do with the rest of the time? This moved along. This actually moved along more quickly than I thought it would. I'm not sure. What I'm going to be working with are all these tiny little pieces, and I might pull out these pieces, the larger bulkhead pieces, and prep those. Just the frames. Those are unlikely to get lost. These little bits are real likely to get lost, and I don't want to do those this late in the stream. That's when I'm most likely to drop them. But yeah, if after I put the third coat on here I still have time, I'm going to cut out these pieces. This one, this one, this one, that one, the two sides and the two ends. And these are optional control panels. Maybe I should. Can you even see what I'm even pointing at? No. Sorry about that. Yeah, I can get these 4 parts out probably at the stream. This is the instrument panel, and there's 2 options for the instrument panel. One takes a decal, and the other one has embossed dials that one can attempt to paint. So I can either attempt to paint it or put the decals on. I'm going to do both. If the painting works, it will look better than the decals because the decals will look like decals. If the painting works, then it will look like instruments in an instrument panel. Right. 1940. Doesn't say what color to paint the instrument panel. Yeah, we'll have to make something up. This is these are wooden pieces. 40 is that dark gray color. That is painted metal. But what I'm looking at is this bit right up here where the instrument panel attaches. That has to be painted something. Maybe I'll look at the box top. I don't know if that is a hint. Yeah, it does. That's painted the wood color. It doesn't say so, but that's painted the wood color, as is the instrument panel itself. It's the same wood. Okay, that's what I'm going to do then. I'm going to put the final coat, hopefully, on this. And if there are still moments left, if there's still a little time left, then I'll get those other parts out. Get those prepped also. Thinking I might even prime some of these things over the weekend, like the machine guns. If I prime those, I can paint them on Monday. I can't paint the seat because that has to be sanded. I can't paint the fuel tank because it has to be sanded and then assembled. But if I pull out these other parts, if there's time to do that, if I pull out those other parts and I get them prepped, I can prime those and get those painted also. Otherwise, I'll just be moving yet even more out of sequence than I am now. What is that? Sorry, I said a bad word. Not a real bad word. I don't use really bad words here, but sometimes something just there's a bump there. Oh, okay. Never mind. I know what those are. Those are the remnants of the molding circles, the bane of existence. Because there's one on either side. Okay. So that's painted. Get this bit here. Vertical bit here. Bit back. Let me get the edges. I didn't look at the edges. Do that while I'm opportunity. Have another chance to do this. Well, no, I really need to do this now. I'm glad I looked. The edges are painted. Because when I paint the bottom, it will not be quite as obvious. Things need to be painted, and these need to be painted on the top. Almost, I have narrowly avoided what could have been not a disaster, but a real annoying kind of issue. In the painting. It's indentations are easy to miss. I mean, that could have been touched up later, but the less that needs to be touched up, the better. Okay, now I need to paint the tail here. I do believe that after this dries, that this will look as good as it's going to get. But I will then, maybe have to do a little touch up on these edges after. But I do believe that after this dries, I'll be ready to turn it over and paint the bottom. Not going to be able to do that today. There's not going to be time for that. But on Monday, I can finish the painting of the hull. That will dry enough to be able to put a paper towel over it, though, because I don't want to get it all dusty. What I will do, though, is I'm going to pull some pieces out that I can prime so that I can paint them on Monday. Saw back, bang into the camera. Right. Can you tell that it's getting close to the third end of the 2.5 hour mark? Where things start getting bumped and banged and messed up. Okay. Is that obvious? Yes. So this should go, it shouldn't take too long. The parts that I'm cleaning up can be mainly filed. A little bit of sanding because they're on the edges. And if I can clean these up, then I can prime them. These 4 pieces, which are the frame of the cockpit, okay? These 4 pieces are the frame of the cockpit. And if I can get these prepped, then I can prime them and then paint them on Monday. And the decision I'll have to make is whether to assemble them and then paint them. I guess I really can't do that. Well, maybe I'll have to decide. Is whether they're going to be assembled and then painted, because they all kind of fit together and I don't want cement marks on the paint, or whether I will paint them and then assemble them. But I'll worry about that on Monday. The thing to do today is to not waste a lot of time thinking and talking about that, and to get on to getting them prepped. Later. So this is going to be a double layer thing. I'm going to take the machine guns out because these can be primed. This is the fuel tank. Okay, that's going to be assembled on Monday. These can be primed so that I can paint them on Monday. Good thinking ahead, planning for the future to determine what can be done on the stream, so that the stream just isn't me saying, well, I wish I had really done that instead so that I could move along. The stream will frequently be, I wish that I had put that somewhere else so it wasn't so much in the way. Okay. So I've got 20 minutes. I can't read the screen here. Yeah, I got 20 minutes left before I officially end at 1 o'clock. Just a reminder, the stream is not as advertised. It's not going from 10 until 2 anymore. It's going from 10 until 1. And instead of taking a too long break between like noon and 12:45 or something, which turned out to be just a real waste of time, I'm just going from 10 until 1, and sometimes, if necessary, I'll take a short break. But it would be a very short break during that period of time. And I'm finding that I can just get so much more done by continuing right on through. That was a funny thing. There's so much more done. Is what have you done? Oh, well, I don't know. I painted little grommets on the. Yeah, what did I do? I painted little grommets on this thing on both sides. I put some wash on this so that it's darker. I put some wash on that so that it's darker. I talked about, I got 3 coats of paint on the hull. Okay, that's okay. And I'm getting some parts prepped for priming and painting on Monday. So in the answer to the question, how slow can I go? I have answered it through my performance of, once again, achieving, it's moving along. It's closer to being done at the end of the stream today than it was at the beginning of the stream. That much is true. Cleaned up. But I'm glad I thought ahead a little bit too, and what am I going to do on Monday? And by just taking some time to get these parts done, I've got parts I can work on. It's weird, there's the outside doesn't look very woody. What are the holes? The holes go all the way through. I might end up having to fill those in. I'm really going to have to look at how this comes together. This is what I'm looking at here. Okay, this is the cockpit, and these are attachment points for various controls. All right, and it folds up around, but then on the outside, these holes, the attachment points, go all the way through, and no, they're not supposed to show. And so, well, that's just going to take more time. I am going to have to see, this one doesn't. Okay. So that's the back of this, and there's no real good demarcation line, but I'm going to have to paint that here and here. But I'm going to have to fill those holes in, because it's just not good. I'm going to have to, okay. I'm groaning about that. The holes should probably be filled in. Pieces get attached. I'm just thinking through the painting process. The holes are in the parts that are painted a different color. They're painted dark gray, not the wooden color. So but then if I fill them in, I have to sand it, and then I'll be sanding down. I'm trying to decide whether to fill the holes in before I assemble this, or whether to put these pieces, the little bitty pieces, in and then fill this in and then repaint it. It does make a difference in terms of how much time it's going to take, and whether I end up priming these now and painting them on Monday. Because if I'm going to fill these holes in later, then I can go ahead and prime them and basically paint them, except for these little bits. But I don't know, after I assemble it, if I fill them in now, I might not be able to get the control bit in on the other side. I mean, I could fill in the hole where they need to go, and this needs to be painted before those go on. So what is going to happen is that I'm going to go ahead and prime these and paint them. And after I put the things that are attached on them, after I attach the bits wherever they go, then I will fill in the hole and sand it down, touch up the spots that I sanded, that had already been painted, and then, yeah, looking at the instructions here. The control stuff goes on the inside. Lever goes here. The trim wheel goes here. The accelerator goes here. Why there is a hole here on the back of this, I don't know. But I think that's the process I'll use is I'll do those attachments and then fill in the holes on the other side and then do a whole lot of little detailed touching up and painting. I don't see any other way around it. And then when I put the things on except for this hole, which is there for no reason at all, at least I'll see then. Okay, I'm looking for circles. Circles. Seriously. And they are there. Here. Okay, I need to sand those off. They're down here. And up there. I'm going to make a decision here, and it might end up costing time later, is to get rid of the circles now on these two parts so that I can prime them, rather than get rid of the sprues on these two parts. Just so that these are ready to go. But geez, really? This works. This is pretty fine grained. I'm actually going to keep these on in order to see the circles. Hi, Enforcer. You're coming in just near the end. It's because I'm ending at 1 nowadays, but it's going okay. I got little bits of things done. I'm in the process now. I'm going from 10 until 1 nowadays, because it works so much better for me rather than going later and taking a break. I've got these mold mark circles, tiny little circles here. Oh, you've been busy? Yeah, I know how that is. That was yesterday for me. All day long was running errands. Put on a whole bunch of miles. It was everything from dropping off recycling to going to a landscaping yard and picking up field stones for a stone pathway. Our vehicle got a real workout yesterday. No, you didn't mention. So you're making another character? This is in addition to Fauna? So is this a character you're actually going to play? Or are you just making it up in anticipation of another campaign? Wasn't expecting to have to do this. This is just really annoying. And I'm going to have to use a coarser grit sandpaper, else it'll never get done. So these circles are really obvious now as I'm sanding it. You can see the dark circle there. That's the indentation that needs to disappear. And I knew they were going to be there. I'm just glad I checked before it was too late. You know, these circles show up in a place where they're just really, really obvious, right at the top of these frames, these bulkhead frames, and because of that, oh, okay. So the DM changed. Okay, it went from just the format is now D&D. So fauna didn't work. You know who comes on chat now and then is the person who plays the bard in our show, and he might really enjoy. You know, if you're both on chat at the same time. I don't know. He hasn't been on chat lately. It might be fun talking about the bard character and what it's like playing one. Okay, I'm going to have to be cautious about this because I don't want to break it, but I like to have something underneath it. I'll just use this. This isn't the best thing, but it will work. But yeah, you guys might want to chat together about what it's like to play a bard. Yeah, I thought it'd be done by now with the stuff I was going to do today until I saw these circles. I was talking earlier about, yeah, things that happen, right? The four things that happen that require filing and sanding of parts. And the one that's inevitable is the place where it's attached to the sprue because it has to attach to the sprue. And then there's always extra plastic there. There's no way to avoid it. Oh, too powerful. Okay. Okay. Well, that's not too bad. Whose character? Nine's the Tabaxi Bard. Doesn't sing. He plays instruments. So an instrumental bard. And when casting bard spells, does it with his instruments, not with song. The one bard that I created was a ghost pirate bard. He was a spoken word bard because as a player, I can't sing. So as a character, the character couldn't sing either because of that. But as storyteller, it makes a lot of sense. It just fits. It fits the character type, I think, really well. Mia or Maya. Okay. Yeah, persuasion. Bards are really good at that, of manipulating and persuading. That's really cool. So are you gonna actually come up with stories to tell during the game? That would be fun. Okay, got less done here than I was planning. I wasn't planning on spending a lot of time sanding out circles. I did want to get at least some parts ready for priming for Monday. I'm not getting those done probably. Well, our dogs are upset about something. Can't hear them because the microphone filters out barking. So they're either playing with each other or there's an intruder in the road outside our house. Okay, so that's done. I need to clean it before I prime it. Oh, these are even more insidious. Pretty shallow when it came out. Oh, it's raised. That's nice. These are raised above the surface, and so all I needed to do was sand off the raised bit. The other ones were indented. This one's indented, but they're very shallow. That's okay. This is a happy thing. I mean, as happy as a bad thing can be, which is that it's going quickly. I was running lots of errands yesterday too. Well, storytelling bards should be fun. Bards are kind of amazing characters. When you first start, I mean, other than being entertainment, they're really not. They really can't do very much. But as they level up, they start acquiring skills, especially bard magic, that turns out to be really powerful. Both in terms of damage dealing, but also healing and buffing. Yeah, I'm not sure, but I'd like to hear about the development of the character. I also want to say that I'm very glad that you heard from your DM, because I know that they were unavailable for quite a while. So I hope that they're feeling okay, that they're healthy and ready to go. These people prime them because they've sanding dust on them. So these 4 pieces, and now I'm going to quickly move along to the rest because I'd really like to be able to prime all of these. Yes, you have a very elaborate tragic backstory there. That's really cool. So why? I mean, was Maya even? I'm sorry, I'm screwing it up one way or the other. Was Maya able to? Why would anyone think she was even capable of summoning a demon? I mean, that's a pretty significant thing. Maybe just a misunderstanding. Okay, this is going okay. These parts of, all these little parts end up being a lot more challenging than one would expect because of the detail and some of the weirdness, like the holes on the back at the attachment points. And it looks like, it's the outside, but the outside shows more than the inside. And it's just kind of disappointing how that detail is done. Do these have circles on them too? I don't know. I'm going to have to look at them through the head magnifier to make sure. But I'm feeling some sense of urgency in getting these prepped enough to prime for painting on Monday. Maybe I'll go a little bit longer if I need to. Oh, okay. Oh, there's even more. That's a shame. But catching up with work, wow. But at least he's healthy, right? I mean, getting better means that he wasn't good, and that's not good news. Hopefully, getting better means like being okay, getting back to normal eventually. So is the DM able to bring that whole backstory into the game effectively? That would be kind of, it'll all be, it could either be revealed as a story being told, to the other party members, or it could be just revealed over time. It'd be interesting to see how that would go. I have to put these back on, sorry. I'm just doing some detail work here, and I'm wanting to make sure I'm getting it right. Just, I can't see enough without these. I need the extra light and the magnification. Okay, so there's little control things there. There's a circle. There's a circle. There's a circle. I knew they would be there. They're hardly visible, but there they are. And they're right at the joints of the wood. One could almost pretend that those are like joiners. I see. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One could pretend that these are, attachment points holding the wood together. But no, what they are is that they're molding flaws. And I want them to go away as much as possible. They really are. They're really obnoxious. Doing on time. Okay, I'm gonna go like 15 extra minutes or something. I'm probably gonna get tired and hungry and grumpy, but I'm already grumpy because of the flaws that I'm finding in these parts. Nice fire. Yeah, Hearthfire is a really good name. I like that. A halfling bard. Cool. When your bard levels up, and becomes overpowered, which they do, being a halfling will be good. Nobody will suspect what's possible. Tiefling, cool. Yeah, it is good to have, it's a lot of fun to create your backstory ahead of time. And you don't have to reveal it all to all the party members right away, but it's there, and then it's consistent, and your character is consistent too, because the backstory explains what they're doing and why sometimes. Spending a lot of time on character development can make the game a whole lot more fun. Otherwise, you're just sort of, bouncing around from whatever the DM throws your way. And having a good backstory that the DM is in attuned to, also makes it fun for them, because then they can use your backstory to help flesh out the story that they're telling or trying to tell. Sorry, I am being annoyed by the circle. So the four things that require cleaning up from plastic molding. One is inevitable, which is the sprue. Another one, which is common, is flashing, where the two halves of the mold didn't come completely together, and that's easy to take care of. Okay, so one you have to do no matter what. The other one's easy. The two halves of the mold not lining up is really unforgivable as just bad quality control on the part of the model producer, not necessarily the designer, but the company that's actually producing the model. Okay. But when it happens, that has to be taken care of. There's no way around it. And the third is this. And this is these little circles that appear in just everywhere all the time in the wrong places. And I don't understand why they're there. I probably should look it up sometime. Why are there these horrible, annoying little circles in the molds of plastic models that makes prepping the pieces such a pain in the butt? And when I was mentioning the four things, I didn't get around to mentioning the circles, but there they are. Okay, that's really cool. Okay, so that's an ability that your bard is going to have, that's going to have to carry over to the rest of the game. So her mom is still alive, but just needs to be found. Is that what's happening? Okay, that answered the question almost before I asked it. So she's on a quest to find her mother. The family thinks that her mother is dead and that she's responsible for it, adding to the urgency of making the effort to find her. That makes it even more sense, because if she finds that her mother is actually alive, not only do they get their mother back, but she's vindicated. Cool. But the DM has to play along with that in order to build it into the campaign. So either like a side quest or just sort of a recurring thing. Oh, so it's up to the DM whether she's still alive or not. I guess that's fair. But nonetheless, Maya's on, you know, in the midst of everything else, wanting to find her mother, whom she believes is still alive. Do you have a sense of when you'll be able to start playing? In terms of both your DM's health and the other players? The easier one first, why not? Okay. But you're at least in touch with the DM now, which is a good thing, both personally and in terms of gameplay. Ask why are you adding the complication of the silver dragon? Is that to further develop the difficult relationship with her sister, or is it just kind of a cool thing to do? So you're writing all of this down. I hope you're taking good notes, and writing it maybe as a story narrative, so that when you do start playing, you can refer to it. Just wondering about your process, because you talked about wanting it to be more than just bullet points. Be hopefully wrapping up fairly soon here, um, as I get rid of these circles that were inevitably going to be there, and in this case, in a really bad spot. Trying to get rid of them enough so that it just looks like a junction spot between the two parts of the lattice rather than a circle. I'm sort of getting there. I need to remember to wash these with an alcohol wash before I prime them, because there's a lot of sanding dust on them. But I'm not going to do that now because I'm not sure if I'm going to prime them like Saturday or Sunday, and between now and then they'll probably pick up some dust or dirt or something. Oh, okay. That okay, that makes sense. That you use that as a character development tool, and then when you got that element in your life, you created the story around it. That's kind of a cool. I'm not familiar with that process, but that seems like a really cool way to do that. Rather than just trying to imagine stuff on your own, which can work, but to get some guidance from a thing like that. Okay, so they're not completely gone, but they're so minimal that I think they're not going to interfere. Well, this one's not good yet. So yeah, I'm trying to go from and limit this from 10 till 1, but today I really wanted to get these things prepped so that I can paint them on Monday. Just the way they're designed and some of the things that are present on these parts is going to make them take a long time, longer than I would have thought otherwise. Rechecking the other one. So Dice and Dungeons, Dungeons and Dragons show, catch the show. Make sure you watch it, either with a live chat on Sundays or on YouTube's later. And if you're interested, you can come back and catch Relaxing Painting with Dice and Dungeons at 10 o'clock on Monday, where I will hopefully be making some decent progress in the assembly of the cockpit area of the model. Once I clean these, even under magnification, they're looking okay. It's just there's just plastic particles. All right. So, okay, yeah, that makes sense. If she was born in a temple, yep, that did send, and I appreciate that. That's really cool character development. I like the way that's working, and I hope that DM and the other players really appreciate all the effort you're putting into character development. That they appreciate that, and maybe even that the other players, maybe not, that they also do that with their characters. Yeah, that really makes a lot of sense. That you can get some basic inspiration, or general ideas from the tables, and then fill it in with your own storytelling skills. What time is it? Yeah, I'm going to have to wrap up pretty soon. Well, the DM, I don't see, having a bard is, sometimes people think, well, the bards are kind of worthless characters, but they are incredibly versatile. And as they level up, can be really important. Our bard has saved my life. I mean, not in real life, in game. Our bard has saved my life. And sometimes, like, just with the buffs, inspiration and things like that, the whole party. And so bards can be very, very important additions to a party. And I hope your DM appreciates that, and that the other characters balance out that way. Thanks for joining in, and hope to see you. Yeah, I think an update on your character and on whether the game is coming along. I would really enjoy hearing about it. So, but thanks for popping in, and maybe a little bit earlier on Monday. I'll be here from 10 until 1, or maybe a little earlier, maybe a little bit later, depending on how the development of these parts go. And I can still use that. Waste not, want not, whatever. But I'll see everybody on Monday, and please take the opportunity to check out our D&D Grow. Yep, Eastern. Well, yeah, it's still Is it still daylight time? I can't remember if it changes this weekend or next. It's Eastern time, either daylight or standard time, and I know it's changing within the next couple of weeks. So there'll be an hour difference. But yeah, hope to see you. I don't know either. I'll find out when I either wake up an hour too early, an hour too late, one of these days. So what I'll be doing on Monday is these parts will be primed. I'll be painting them. This epoxy will be set. I'll be sanding that. And then underneath here are the fuel tank pieces, and I'll be getting rid of the seams. And November 3rd, so it's another week. Okay, another week yet before it changes. So it's still Eastern Daylight Time. This came out looking okay with the third coat. I'm really happy with that. And after I assemble it, I'll be washing it, so that will look even better. Yeah, so a bunch of stuff. I'm ready to do a bunch of stuff. All this little detail painting on this stuff. Cleaning them up after they're and primed between now and then. Sanding that down. Finishing the fuel tank. It should be a fairly productive stream on Monday. But do catch our Dungeons and Dragons show. That's what Dyson Dungeons is all about, Dungeons and Dragons. So participate as you can. Oh yeah, I need to paint the bottom. Huh. Can't forget that. Don't forget that. 3 coats on the bottom. That will be on a feature on Monday as well. Thanks, everybody. I do need to get going. Not only did I go longer than I wanted, which isn't really a problem, but I need to go. So see you all on Monday at about 10. Thanks for joining in. Bye.